And first of all, thank you for joining me today on a Saturday afternoon, and obviously a big day. But how are you and your family doing so far during this tough situation?
We are doing fantastic. Everybody's healthy. Some are celebrating more than others at this moment. But the greatest thing is my youngest grandson just sent me his happy dance video. So pretty exciting to see that 7 years old, he's paying attention to what's going on around him.
Yeah. So before we get to your career, let's just start with the election. And obviously, um, I'm happy with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and obviously made history with the first woman vice president. And what are your overall thoughts with this election? It took 4 days to make this happen. So.
Well, for me, I'm very optimistic because our country's at a point where healing is essential, and particularly in light of the industry that we serve in human trafficking. We see a lot of injustices that lead to victimization, and it's critical across the board that people really start looking at each other as human beings who are deserving of respect and dignity, and just really being treated with as much fairness and opportunity as possible. And I believe with the Biden-Harris combination, which are now our president-elect and vice president-elect, I think we're going to be trending in the right direction.
So obviously with you, I got to ask you this: with you being a private investigator, I'm sure you dealt with a lot of stuff. What is Trump? What with Trump is trying to do with the legal stuff, and obviously he's not going to give up till the end. And for you being a private investigator, do you think what advice would you tell Trump? Would you tell him not to do this, or do you think that obviously he's going to lose at the end? In my opinion, I don't think the Supreme Court will agree with him, but obviously you need evidence for this case.
Well, I'm definitely not an attorney, and I'm a very big advocate for everybody, whether I like them or not. They are entitled to the full brunt of the judicial system. I'll save some of my personal opinions on that, but I do believe that everybody has a right to utilize the system and the legal and ethical opportunities that it affords for you. But by the same token, I'm also a very big proponent of dignity, whether that's something that you're giving to somebody else or something that you're holding within yourself for the greater good of other people and not necessarily just for yourself. And I think for the dignity of this country, for the electoral process, for the millions upon millions of people who went out and voted for the first time this year, many of them who voted maybe for the first time in a long time, respect everybody's process, what they've done with the sacrifices that everybody has made across the board. And, it's time to put personal biases and hate and anger aside. And it's not always necessary to litigate everything out there. And I will say from a private investigator standpoint, I have seen some really crazy stuff that happens in the judicial system. And I just hope that this is not a continuation of crazy stuff that happens in the judicial system.
Yeah. So now I want to get into your career, and my first question to you: when did you get interested in being a private investigator, and who convinced you to do it, or was this your passion growing up?
It was not my passion growing up. I wanted to be a journalist, and Barbara Walters was my hero growing up. I'm clearly aging myself quite a bit when I'm talking about Barbara Walters, but she was more of an investigative journalist, and I liked that style of journalism. So, there was a little bit of a natural curiosity, a natural tie to that. If you ask my mother, probably where I got a lot of my tenacity from, she said from an early age that I would argue with the devil if I thought that my position was right, and I would get you every piece of argument necessary. So I think it was kind of a collection of things, but over the years, I've spent about 17, 18 years in the legal process of things. And I just, it's just kind of something I fell into, but really wasn't something I was looking to do.
So who helped you along? Obviously, it's a tough job sometimes being a private investigator, but who helped you along the way in college, or what advice did you get from other private investigators coming into this job?
Well, in college, I was on a path for law school.
Yeah.
And of course, that's kind of how I got involved in this, through a variety of chains of events. and none of my college professors really encouraged me to do anything outside of law, but they did encourage me to constantly learn and to always adapt to whatever it was that I was learning, not necessarily to change who I was, but to be open-minded that my career that I thought I might have been on the path for may not have been the correct path for me. And as I continue to learn and experience life, it's okay to change your mind and what you want to do. So I really didn't have any specific role models, but what really I think solidified it for me as a private investigator was in working in the legal field, doing a lot of trial work, a lot of trial prep and investigation specifically for trial work. I realized that there was a great need for individuals who needed a better opportunity to have their case heard when proper and relevant information was brought forward.
So take me back to your first opportunity, and the first big thing you worked on, the first project you worked on as a private investigator. Take me back to the first opportunity.
Oh my goodness. The first opportunity really wasn't all that exciting, but to somebody who's sitting outside of it, but for me it was very exciting because I was able to find the one thing that everybody else kept overlooking. I kind of look at doing private investigation work like putting together a jigsaw puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
You take one individual piece by itself, it really doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But if you can kind of step back and say, okay, there's a bigger picture here, and let me find every possible piece that I can find to create this picture. And then realizing even when you complete that puzzle, that picture is just a snapshot in the moment. So what happened before that picture was taken? What happened before that snapshot? And my very first case that I found that little snapshot really didn't matter much to anybody except for myself and the client that was involved in that time. And I think even, to back up a little bit before that, I think some of the things that really was a catalyst for me was having, and I don't mean to sound sexist, but this is the way it's going to come across, is having men telling me that I'm in the wrong place, that that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm a woman and women just don't do those things, or you're not equipped, or you're not smart enough, or whatever other terms that they were using. And most of the times they really weren't polite. And the more that they kept telling me I couldn't, then my mother's words in my ears kept saying, you'll argue with the devil to prove your point. The more I was insistent that I was going to prove my point, and the more I would work harder for my cases. But the longest case I worked on was 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
wow.
Great.
Crazy.
Wow. See, if you don't mind, can you tell me what kind of case was it, or?
It was a civil litigation, and it ended up being a major corporate issue. My clients were they were residents in a particular building who it was flawed construction, but we were battling the corporate greed and the corporate giant who, like many other individuals at that level, they have a team of attorneys on payroll, and to them fighting these things were really nothing out of the ordinary for them. And a lot of times, if you have a lot of money, doesn't necessarily mean you get all the justice. It means you have more opportunity at justice than the people who do not have the financial means to fight somebody at that level, particularly for that length of time. And while the case information is public, I still maintain the integrity of my clients. I don't really talk about their case without their permission. But with that being said, it was a 7-year battle. It found its way to the Supreme Court of the state of Ohio, and our clients got justice in the end.
So for you, throughout the years, are you always like on your feet 24/7, and this is like a nonstop job, and you got to be on task all the time, right? Is that for you in your own case? Are you always like on your feet 24/7?
I am for me, but I think it's because it's my personality type, maybe not necessarily because it's something that I'm compelled to do. It's definitely not something that Hugh demands of me. It's more the demands I put on myself. But I also know that most of the time when it comes to a crisis situation with individuals who are being victimized, they're not punching a time clock. And most of the time crises happen in the wee hours of the night or early morning, and not necessarily between 9 and 5. So I do always literally have within arm's reach 2 cell phones that are always on. And if I'm not on cell phones, I'm on computers doing things like this, Zooms, reaching out to people. And it is dramatically different now because of COVID. But, you know, for them, for victims across the country, for families who are trying to heal, or families that are trying to or locate a missing individual, you know, life doesn't stop. Their nightmare doesn't end. And, you know, when there's something that needs to be done, I'm not going to be the one to say, well, call me back on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning. If it needs to be done at this moment, it needs to be done at this moment.
So during this tough time, and what have you been doing? Just have you been doing like weekly Zoom calls with your clients, or what have you been doing job-wise during this tough time?
A lot of it's been education and program development. We've done some really great work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And we're we're in partnerships with several agencies throughout the country and developing programs that we feel can be sustainable throughout COVID-19, regardless of whether or not we're having one-on-one interactions with individuals, families, or educational institutions. We're consistently, you know, remodeling, revamping, and finding ways to reach those who need to hear the message before they become victims of any type of crime, whether it's what we call CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. We try to mitigate some risk factors that compel somebody to become a runaway student, or a runaway child. And, you know, anything that we know or that statistics have proven puts people in a specific risk category, right, we're trying to stay ahead of the curve and address those needs as quickly as possible to try to reduce victimization. And a lot of people don't understand that during, you know, lockdowns, our children in particular, they don't have that first line of defense by being able to go to school and maybe get into a situation where they can confide in a trusted educator or maybe a school resource officer or even a friend and say, listen, I'm in trouble and I need help. You know, those things are very, very challenging for us in this COVID era. And the same thing with the individuals who are adults who suffer from domestic abuse or intimate partner violence.
Yeah, so I want to get to your foundation, obviously, with Coach Hugh Jackson, and it's just amazing what you guys are doing. And he explained it during our interview last week, and it's just amazing you're helping these kids out, and not even kids, all the people that are involved too. And what's it like just to connect with these kids and adults with this foundation? And when was the first time you connected with Hugh Jackson with this foundation?
I met Hugh totally by the grace of God, and it was through somebody that I was working with in the Human Trafficking Task Force in Northeast Ohio, Detective John Morgan, and he was a guest speaker for Hugh at one of Hugh's events. And in my working relationship with John Morgan, as an investigator, he's a detective, I had attended that event with him and was introduced to Hugh, and the rest is pretty much history at that point. But it, I would say, was probably one of the best opportunities that I've had. I love what I do. It gives me a lot of heartbreak sometimes, but the great outcomes that we're able to facilitate really keep me motivated to move forward.
So, so what's it like just to be connected with these kids, helping them out, and even the adults, just to lead them to the right path and wherever they want to go, especially the kids?
Well, for us, it's twofold. You know, first and foremost, it's about honesty and transparency, letting them know that they can still be a child, they can still enjoy technology for all the tools that it has to offer, but teaching them proper use of that technology. You know, for example, what's a trusted website? You know, when you're doing research for things, you know, at school, you got to be very careful what websites you go to, because they can actually lead down a path that you really don't want to go. And it's okay to use social media to hang out with your friends, talk to your friends, but make sure that when you're on those sites, how do you manage yourself? How do you navigate staying connected with people all over the world without putting yourself in jeopardy? And to see that they're incredibly smart. Mm-hmm. I mean, the stuff that they know is mind-blowing. And, you know, I'll never forget, this was a couple of years ago when my youngest grandson was 5, and he was calling me out because I didn't know how to properly use Snapchat. And my 5-year-old grandson was teaching me how to use Snapchat. So, you know, those comical situations are also great learning opportunities for me, because it teaches me what's relevant in their minds, so I can work with them at a level that we have almost a bond, and something where I don't look like, the old person doesn't have a clue with what's going on out there in the world. And when you can make those connections and break down those barriers, and they talk to you like you're one of them, and they get so excited because they're teaching you something you didn't know, they love it. And then it opens up the door, and then I can talk to them about the things that really matter. You don't have to be defined by how many likes you get on your social media or how many friends that you have on your social media, and to project who you are as an individual. And if they don't like you, that's okay, because you're not going to like everybody else too. And even though in the end game, it's preventing victimization, our goal is to keep them as safe as humanly possible, teach them about the scary things, about making sure that they're not sharing their locations, not sharing intimate pictures that they shouldn't be sharing. There's a terminology, it's called sexting. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Mm-hmm. But, I had an 8-year-old who, to me, they thought it was just no big deal, taking pictures in the bathtub. They had no idea that it was something that they shouldn't be doing. You don't want to scare them to death, but you also want to make sure that they understand what boundaries are and how they need to keep themselves safe. And it's challenging sometimes, but like I said, kids they'll call you out really quick. They'll call you out really quick. But if they think that they've got the upper hand and they know more about technology than you do, for me, it's like a game. And then then they're cool. They'll have a conversation with me.
Speaking of kids using social media in a positive way, obviously I saw your interview with Global Kid Media. He's doing big things at 14 years old. This kid is amazing what he's doing. But what's it like seeing these kids utilizing the platforms like Instagram, Twitter, Facebook for podcasts? And there's not only him, there's a 9-year-old girl out there who has a podcast. She does interviews too, and I've seen that page, and she's amazing. But what's it like just to see kids using platforms now, utilizing and making creative things for them?
I think it's outstanding because it is part of their world. It's part of the way that we all communicate now, and for them to know that they have a voice. And that along with that voice comes a lot of responsibility. And how do you manage that responsibility? I think it's fantastic. I love to see our youth doing positive things and setting examples that their peers can follow. And as a matter of fact, I'm very inspired by a lot of these young adults and what they're doing. They actually motivate me. And I try as best as I can to let them know that, their audience, their target audience may be their peers, but the ripple effect of what they're doing is well beyond their age group. And to me, it's amazing, and I love it. Yeah, I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah. So with your foundation with Hugh Jackson, are you guys currently working on some big projects currently, or no?
Our biggest project, we just unveiled it in July. It's called our Strangers to Changers program, and this is where we're reaching out to every community person, organization, group, small or large, and just asking them to join us in the Strangers to Changers program, and work within your community and find ways that you can make a positive impact in your community. And it doesn't have to be something on the grand scale. It can be something on a much more intimate level, a smaller scale, but just do something, because our world is so divided right now. Our country it's got a lot of healing to do, and there's still a lot of anger and a lot of bitterness out there. And it's going to take all of us to do our part to change it in the right direction. And it's easy for all of us, particularly in the COVID era, to lock ourselves away and maintain that isolation and truly be strangers within our communities. And instead of being strangers, we really want people to be changers in your community. Even if you can't go outside, you might have a neighbor that is isolated and they're lonely and they have no family around them. And just, if social safe distancing, of course, but just check in on them and say, hey, is there anything I can do for you today? You may not be able to change their circumstances, but you can change that moment that they are living in that circumstance. And just to know that they're not forgotten can really get them through that moment. And those things, they build upon each other. And you might start finding ways that, you can organize a small group of people, say, listen, each week, pick a day of the week, let's go check on all of our neighbors that we know are isolated, they're lonely, they might have physical limitations, they may have other barriers that are preventing them from either feeling like they're still part of the society. They may not be able to have transportation to go pick up some of the simplest necessities. They may not be well enough or healthy enough where they can even go out and pick up their prescriptions or something from the grocery store. Make small movements within your community to say, what do we need here? What do we need in my immediate vicinity? What do we need in my 2 square block radius? What do I need in my place of employment or my children's school? And what can I do to fulfill that need? And then just bring a bunch of changers together. I mean, this is the way that we are going to heal. And one of the messages through the Strangers to Changers is the reason why we're so passionate about this is human trafficking is the net result of individuals who are exceedingly vulnerable, and a trafficker or a perpetrator exploits those vulnerabilities. And those vulnerabilities could be feeling of isolation, loneliness, not feeling loved. It could be financial devastation. That could be just simply that, I need to feed my family. I don't know what to do, and they get picked up by a trafficker. It could be a young person who, they're stuck in a home that's unsafe or unhealthy for them, and they're looking for ways to escape. And if they know that there are other people out there that care about them and that they're not there to do them harm, you can help get them through that transition, which may reduce the likelihood of victimization.
Yeah, so that's why I feel like I'm now I'm more confident. I'm just for Biden and Harris. I feel like they can make this happen, make the world better, and come together. And I'm really confident about this now. And everybody should be happy and excited for this next 4 years. And I feel like Biden and Harris will make it happen. It's going to take a while, like you said, but
Yes.
it's a step-by-step process for them. But I feel like now all of us can just relax, because I feel like Harris and Biden, they're capable of doing this, and I feel like they bring a different dimension to the White House. So
I agree. I mean, years ago, I used to work for the legislative body in the state of Florida. I started out with the Senate Finance and Tax, and ended up working over on the House side, and that subsequently landed me in the governor's office. I worked for Governor Lawton Chiles, and just an incredible human being. I loved him, loved his entire family. He's long since passed away, and he's in a different place of beauty and comfort. But it taught me a lot about the process, and it is a very, very complicated process. And I have tremendous respect for people who go into politics for the right reasons, to be that change, to be that positive change in their community, and to be the voice for those who otherwise would go voiceless. I have a lot of faith that the system is a great system. I believe that our president and vice president-elect are going in with the right intentions. And I think that just the genuineness of them and the way that they see their fellow man, fellow woman, they see them as individuals first and foremost. They respect their individuality, what makes them different, whether it's a racial difference, it could be a social difference, it could be a religious difference. They respect each one of those differences. And to me, that's the crux of healing our country, because everybody doesn't sound the same, nor should our opinions be the same, and our voices are definitely never going to be the same, but we all deserve the same opportunities. And I'm very, very hopeful.
yeah, so I want to get to another important topic that everyone should be talking about: women getting their opportunities, not only in sports, but like what you're in and other job fields. And what's it like just to see other women and just like you, and getting the opportunities to fulfill their dreams, and especially women coaching male sports now. That's a big thing I love seeing. And women getting the opportunity to cover sports, being a broadcaster, sports reporter, even what you're doing. And what's it like just to see women proving people wrong now in this generation?
I think it's come a long way, particularly going back to my time in government, which started in the late 80s and early 90s in Florida. And then after that, I was in sports myself. It's kind of hard to believe now, because it's been 30 years since I've really been involved in it.
Yeah.
But I used to own and operate my own martial arts studios.
Wow.
So that was quite some time ago. And even in that environment, there was still a lot of barriers. And in the early 90s to mid 90s, when I was most active in these things, when I would teach women's self-defense courses, just as part and parcel to what I did as community give back, I would hear it consistently that women always felt like, they they wanted to achieve more, they wanted to be more, they wanted to be better, but A, either didn't know how to get there, or B, didn't have the proper support to get there. And to see that now it's become much more accessible, it's becoming more visible, and the success of what's happened today with Kamala Harris and her being duly elected to vice president, I think it's setting a really great example for many, many, many young women, young girls that are coming up in a different era, that it is different and we can make it different. And it's not unlike any other barrier that's been put up for any other race or any other nationality. They're there. And the best way to break those barriers is to be cognizant of the fact that they are there. Mm-hmm. They're not going to go away. We can't wish them away. We can't ignore them and say that it's not affecting me, so therefore it doesn't exist. Right. We know that they're there. And how do we get beyond those barriers, much like women have been doing in this country for several decades? And I know the African American population, our Black community, our Latino communities, and many of our foreign citizens that come into our country, they've all had to experience barriers. And to see somebody who is woman, she's female, she's mixed ethnicity, she's breaking a lot of those barriers all simultaneously. And to me, that's, I'm a big sugar junkie. I love my desserts. That is ice cream with the whipped cream and the cherry on top, and you name the sprinkles, throw it all on top of there, and you're just indulging in this wonderful feast of something that's very sweet and very rewarding. For me, that's the way I see what's happening right now. And you've got two people who, again, truly respect the process and know that opportunities are there. We just have to fight for those opportunities. And this is what happens when you fight for them.
Yeah. So I want to talk. Explain to me, how was it? What was it like being a martial arts coach and teaching this woman to be badass and and then being self-defense and proving people wrong? What was that like being a coach?
It was for me. It was a lot of fun. It was very personal as well. And with martial arts, and again, I'm going to preface this by saying I've been out of the industry for quite some time, but it's not unlike any other sport that you see. There's much more to the sport than just the activity itself. It builds a lot of character. It builds a lot of perseverance. You really learn who you are and what motivates you, what makes you tick. And getting that, and I'm going to use Hugh Jackson's, phrase, getting those small wins and getting them consistently, they build that level of confidence that you need to keep moving forward and to try, more challenging, goals and set yourself up for greater wins. When I saw students and women going through self-defense courses really gain the confidence that they needed, they walked differently. They acted differently. They felt differently about themselves. There were things that they would no longer tolerate that in the very beginning they just succumbed to. And to me, that was greater than any other achievement that they could have gotten in that particular sport, whether it was winning a national title or a state title. Those are great. Those are public outward validation of what you've achieved. But when you see the internal achievements, those stay with you forever. Trophies go on a shelf. Yeah. Lord knows they collect as I see behind you, trophies go on a shelf, and they're reminders, they're outward reminders of what you've achieved internally. And I think that's the greatest thing about sports is that internal achievement.
So what advice would you give kids or other people that are trying to be in the same field as you as a private investigator? And what would you tell them to expect when getting into that type of job?
Well, most people don't realize there's about 17 to 20 different specialties as a private investigator. It's not just a cookie cutter, one size fits all. Find out what you're really interested in, because private investigators is just kind of like a catch-all title. Some people really like to deal in anti-money laundering. That's where you're tracing down wherever you find that money trail is where you're going to find the problems. And it sounds really exciting, because when you get to that end and you find out, who's been doing what and how they've been hiding this money or shuffling this money from point A to point B, it sounds really cool. but it's very monotonous. It can be very boring until you get to that big win at the end. You know, you see, is that really what I want to do? And it may be yes, it may be no. And other people think it's like, you know, you're sitting in a parked car somewhere, and you're spying on somebody's house, or their spouse, or their boyfriend or girlfriend, or you know, their partner, and seeing who's cheating on you. You know, there's a variety of different things, but you got to find out what really makes you tick and why you want to be a private investigator, and then kind of hone into that specialty, and then read about it, learn about it, ask different people in the industry, you know, can I follow you? Can I work with you on some things? And I would start with, you know, actually our sworn law enforcement officers, because it's going to give you a completely different perspective, but there's a lot of crossover between a sworn law enforcement officer and what we do as private investigators. And in most states, it's a professional license that is required, and licensing varies from state to state, training varies from state to state, but I think it's something that for a lot of people could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. But it seems like a tough job though, but it's worth it though, right?
It is. Right now, I use my license to help when we have individuals that have gone missing. That's pretty much where I use my license now. I no longer perform work as an independent private investigator for hire. All the work I do is solely and exclusively to benefit the agencies that we work with through the Hugh Jackson Foundation.
Yeah. So now I'm sure you know about the segment. I did it with Hugh Jackson the other day. It's called the rapid fire segment.
I do.
So you ready for this?
I'm ready.
All right. Now, did you watch any sports growing up?
I did.
Football, basketball. What's your most?
When I was really little, I watched baseball. I grew up in Hammond, Indiana until I was 11 years old. So everything was the Chicago Cubs. Went to a lot of Chicago Cubs baseball games. Went to one Chicago Bears game, and I just didn't understand it. And I couldn't see because everybody was bigger than me, and I just couldn't really keep up with what was going on. As a teenager, it was basketball. It was all basketball. The high school I went to consistently won state championships, so everything was basketball, basketball, basketball. And then as I got older, it kind of became a mix between football and basketball. Sorry, Hugh, God knows that I've learned much more about NFL now than I had in the past, but I was a collegiate football fan. You know, to me, these guys were playing with all the heart that I could ever imagine. They were eager to get into the National Football League. So, and now it's pretty much NFL and basketball, but more NFL than basketball these days.
Did you actually, speaking of the Chicago sports, did you grow up watching the Bulls when you were watching them?
I did, but it wasn't until my teenage years and when I really got into basketball. But my heart still was. Most of my family was still back in the greater Chicago area at that time. So once you're a Chicago, you know, community sports supporter, you kind of stay with it.
Yeah. So I told Hugh Jackson, I'm a big Dallas Cowboy fan, and I told him we can use you as a head coach, and we're struggling right now. So I told him I would rather have you as a head coach than Mike McCarthy. I mean, he's ready. It seems like Hugh Jackson's ready to come back to coaching, whatever it is. And he said he wants to come back. So I'm hoping he gets his opportunity. He deserves it. He's a great coach. So
I couldn't agree with you more.
So my next question for you is, what kind of music do you like to listen to?
Oh my goodness. I would say R&B, soul, and adult top 20. I'm not too much into the bubblegum music, although like I said, I work with a lot of teenagers and the music is all over the place. My grandchildren like anything that you can jump around to. So it depends on whose company I'm keeping. As long as it's not Baby Shark, I'm cool.
Do you like hip hop, rap, or no?
I do like hip hop, rap. The only reason why I'm not too into rap is because most of the time I can't really understand. It goes so fast, you know. Now, if I'm reading the lyrics when I'm first hearing songs, of which I love to do, you know, and I can see and hear what they're saying at the same time, then I'm cool.
Yeah.
But I have ADHD issues, so if it goes too fast, I'm having a hard time keeping up with you.
Did you play any sports growing up?
No,
Oh.
no, I didn't do any sports until I got involved in martial arts in my 20s.
Hmm. Uh, favorite food?
Favorite, it's not really a food, it's a food group.
Oh.
Anything sweet, it's terrible. Yeah, I can just see hopefully, I know that my grandchildren aren't listening to this now because they're playing.
So outside of work and outside the foundation, what else do you like to do?
Spend time with my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, I miss them. They're 1,200 miles away, but yeah, thank you, COVID.
Where are you located now?
I'm in Cincinnati. My family's in Florida.
Yeah. So how's it over there with the COVID numbers in Cincinnati?
Unfortunately, the numbers are escalating in the Ohio region. Hamilton County, which is the county where we live, the numbers are spiking, which also makes it more challenging for us in working with our victims in the Columbus area, the Cincinnati area, and the Cleveland area. Although I grew up outside of Chicago until I was 11, I spent the majority of my life in Florida as a younger adult in the last 20 years here in Ohio. So I'm always watching the numbers everywhere because I have family in each of those different locations. My son, my grandchildren, my mom, they're in Florida. So I watch those numbers very carefully.
So what was your most memorable sporting event you've been to?
Oh my goodness. That's a hard one because I remember my first time that I went to see a Cubs game as a little kid, and I bought a charm bracelet, and I still to this day have that charm bracelet. I remember my first experience watching the Cleveland Cavaliers, and LeBron James was new to the team at that time. My son was friends of the then head coach's son, and we sat on the bench right behind LeBron, and I'm looking at this kid and I'm looking at my kid and I'm like, they're just kids.
Yeah.
You know, and that image just still really hasn't left my head. So it's not these great, sports stories. Everything kind of has a memory that's attached to it. And I would say that my favorite football memory is yet to come.
Yeah, so speaking of LeBron, I had a couple players on my show that played against LeBron in the NBA, and they told me stories about it, and they said that he's the toughest player to guard on the court, for sure, obviously. So
he's a beast. I'll tell you, his body's definitely changed a lot from the time that we sat behind him on the bench that first year that he was recruited. But he's an incredibly talented athlete, incredibly talented.
So for you, outside of the 7-year case, what was the toughest case you worked on outside of that?
Well, for me, the toughest cases are the emotional ones when I've got family members who don't know where their loved one is, and having to talk to them and assure them that, don't give up hope, and that there's a whole group of people out there who care. And it's not because it's our job, it's because it's something that we choose to do. And those are, those never leave you. They never leave you. And some of those could be resolved in as quick as, 5 days. And I've got cases that still aren't resolved. And I don't know where they'll go. The nature of what we do in human trafficking, prevention, rescue, and recovery is when, people always ask me about statistics. They want to know how many people have you saved and how many people have you gotten off the streets and what are they doing now and what are your greatest success stories. What I really want people to realize is that when individuals are going through that survivorship process, the last thing they want us to do is put them on, on display like a show horse and say, okay, now tell everybody about your experience and what happened and where you're at right now. Recovery is a lifelong process. And I just, my heart's always full of prayer and hope for them. And to me, those are cases that continue, and they will continue probably until I take my last breath, because I'll always wonder what happened.
So what are you planning on doing tonight to celebrate?
Oh my goodness. Well, I'll tell you what I want to do, which is probably very different from what I will do. I would, what I will do is I'll be, what I do pretty much most of the time is I isolate myself away from large crowds.
Right.
But I will be glued to the TV watching all the media reports. As I said before, my family is in Florida, and unfortunately, I'm a high-risk individual. So if I'm out around other people, I'm exceedingly careful who I'm with, and I need to make sure that I maintain really good health. So when I have a client or situation that needs my professional assistance, that I'm healthy, and I can assure them that I have been careful to not expose them by limiting my exposure myself. So I will be in my apartment, glued in front of my TV like a little old lady with her cats with an Afghan on her lap, but that's that stops at being in front of my TV. I don't own a cat and I don't own an Afghan, but I will be watching all the celebrations of what's going on.
So,
and I would love to say I'm drinking Hugh's tequila, but I'm out.
Okay, you know what? Speaking of tequila, Hugh, somehow we have to connect Hugh with The Rock because he wants to compete against The Rock with tequila.
There's no competition. I love Dwayne. I think he's a phenomenal athlete as well. Bring it on, baby. There is no way. I mean, he could probably, well, there's no probably, he can bench press me one-handed, but there's no way he's going to compete with us on this tequila. This is not happening.
No.
You got to make that happen because it's just.
I got to reach out to. It's tough. I actually, you know what? I reached out to Rock to come on the podcast. It's tough. It's tough to even get a hold of him. I actually, I interviewed one of his his cast members when he was in the show Ballers. If you know that show.
I do. Mm-hmm.
I interviewed his coworker on the cast, Chris D Loft, and I asked him, "Can you help me get The Rock on?" He said, "I'll try," but he's always busy. So.
Yeah. It's well, I'll put our tequila. Our tequila. I'll put Hugh's tequila up against anybody's any day of the week. Let's blindfold them all and just do the taste testing. It's amazing stuff.
So what advice do you give to your grandchildren every morning or every day you talk to them on the phone or a Zoom call, whatever it is? What advice do you give your grandchildren every day?
Love yourself more than anybody else in the world, because when you truly know the value of yourself, you're going to maintain that value. You're going to be a good person, and you're not ever going to want to hurt somebody else. So
the last two things here before I let you go, what's the one word that you keep for yourself when you wake up in the morning?
Hope.
Yeah.
Hope. It's what gets me through every day.
And the last thing here, would you like to say anything to all the nurses, doctors, and essential workers right now?
Oh my gosh. Well, first and foremost, they have saved my life more than once. So I'm eternally grateful to them. And I honestly owe my life to the medical community. And I think that they are the most underappreciated individuals out there. And not just because of COVID, but now even more so because of COVID. These people, they carry home a lot of people's burdens with them under normal circumstances. And right now, and I know what that feels like to see somebody suffering, and there are times that you just can't help them or you can't fix them and you can't cure them. And those are things that affect you as a human being, and you take it home every single day. You take it home to your families. I realize that, I appreciate that, I respect them for what they do. And I love them immensely for their unselfish service. Yeah, well said. And there it is, episode 592. And just keep it going here. Thank you, Kimberly, for joining me today on this podcast on a Saturday afternoon, and obviously on a big day, and all of us are celebrating right now. And thank you again. You're such an inspiration, and keep up the great work with the Hugh Jackson Foundation. And if you guys need help with the foundation, I'm here because I love helping out the community and helping out the foundation. So if you guys need anything, I'm here to help out too. And I'm sure we're all going to connect again soon. But keep grinding. You're a warrior. You're a badass. So you and your family stay safe. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me. And remember, don't be a stranger, be a changer. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.